Hi everyone, and welcome to today's episode. Today I am so excited to be joined by Opeyemi Sofoluke. Opeyemi is an expert in the world of diversity, equity and inclusion, also known as DE&I. Opeyemi has been featured in a Forbes list of 30 inspirational women and is also a published author. What does being intentional about growth mean to you, and how have you really applied that to your career?
When it comes to growth, you really have to want it, you have to desire it. And there's an element of sometimes being uncomfortable.
How would you say you've kind of built your brand around it?
I started to realize that people make assumptions about who you are based on sometimes how you look or how they perceive you to be. If you're not intentional about your personal brand, people set the brand for you.
What has been one of the most defining moments of your career or personal growth?
I think I have to say writing the book with Raphael. And when I randomly get messages from people about the book, I'm so encouraged because I'm like, oh my gosh, this is great. It's doing what we wanted it to do, which is to educate, empower, encourage.
Hi everyone, and welcome to today's episode. Today I am so excited to be joined by Opeyemi Sofoluke. Opeyemi is an expert in the world of diversity, equity and inclusion, also known as DE&I. As the head of DE&I for Europe, the Middle East and Africa at Adobe, she leads the strategy and execution of impactful initiatives across over 20 countries, driving meaningful change. Before joining Adobe, Opeyemi held key leadership roles in DE&I across major global organizations such as Meta and J.P., where she was the technology, diversity and inclusion lead and served as vice president, shaping the DE&I strategy for an organization of over 5,500 technologists. Beyond her corporate impact, Opeyemi has been featured in a Forbes list of 30 inspirational women and is also a published author. She co-wrote Twice as Hard alongside her husband, Raphael Sofoluke, a powerful book that delves into Black identity in the workplace and business, offering readers practical strategies for personal and professional growth. If you're interested in being intentional about growth, building a strong personal brand, and taking control of your own narrative, then this episode is for you. Hi, Opeyemi. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Hello. Thank you for having me. I'm really, really excited about this conversation.
Of course, of course. Me too, me too. I know I've given a bit of an introduction to yourself, but could you just start by telling everyone a bit more about yourself and your journey so far?
Yeah, of course. So I started my career in the investment banking world. And when I first started my career, I was in trade management and trade support for equities and equity derivative groups. And you're probably wondering, how did you end up in DEI? So for me, I think coming out of uni, that was the main thing people were doing around me at least. I went to Aston University, so I was in a business university, people really ambitious, very hardworking. Loads of people had done year-long placements. I chose to do a summer internship. So I had first did a spring internship at Goldman Sachs, then did a summer at JP Morgan. And so that meant that going into my final year, I kind of had myself set up. So it just felt like the right next step in starting your career in a good organization. And so it did definitely provide me a great foundation, but very quickly I realized I don't love this work.
Yeah.
And so I transitioned into some project management roles across the middle office, but still, I just didn't find that sense of purpose and meaning in the work that I was doing. Then I remember, being a young graduate working and coming across a CSR team, so a corporate social responsibility. And I thought, oh, this sounds good. This sounds like the part of the bank I want to be in where you're actually using kind of the bank's resources to actually do good. And this was a team that very rarely recruited. But there was another team within the bank that sat within a tech division called Technology for Social Good. And they happened to have an open role for a regional program manager. And I remember when I saw that job role, I was like, oh my goodness, this is for me. This is something I can do. And I applied. And so I joined and I was successful in the application process and I joined the Tech for Social Good team. And that was really my entry into kind of the social responsibility piece of work, but also diversity, equity, and inclusion. Because some of the programs that I managed had a focus on partnering with charities and NGOs to support them from a tech perspective, but equally there was a focus on bringing more women into our graduate programs, or into JP Morgan's graduate programs at the time. And as my role grew and as the years progressed, I kind of had the opportunity to either focus more on the social good side or to focus more on the diversity and inclusion side. And of course, being a Black woman in tech, also starting a career in a predominantly male and white environment, I was like, oh my gosh, DEI sounds like the space for me, where I could do work that impacts kind of my world on a personal level, but also the world of so many other people.
Yeah, yeah. Do you know, as you're speaking, I can really see your passion when you're talking about you and I love that because honestly, I think it's if you get a role that you are actually passionate about and you're getting to do it as
Yeah.
your job, then you're lucky. And I think some of what you said will be music to people's ears because I think some people are afraid when they start out in one area or one industry or one role,
Mhm.
they can be a bit concerned about I'm not really passionate about this or this isn't working out for me. How can I make, how can I pivot or change? So it's proof that you can do that.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, perfect. And so we are today going to be delving into growth, strong personal branding, taking control of your narrative. So if we start off on the growth front, when we
Mhm.
think about shaping our careers, there often is a focus on, the importance of growth. What does being intentional about growth mean to you, and how have you really applied that to your career?
Oh, I think that's a really good question. I think firstly, when you think about growth, there's an element of you needing to be self-aware, because you can't intentionally think about growing if you're not aware of your kind of areas of growth. So I think that's the first place. But for me, on a personal level, I have found that it is so important to be aware of the areas you want to grow, but also how to get to that next step. And so very early on in my career, and I think throughout my life, I've been someone that's been quite driven and always focused on setting myself goals, really almost having accountability partners as well to hold me to it, looking for opportunities to push myself outside of my comfort zone. And so I have found that, like, when it comes to growth, you really have to want it, you have to desire it. And there's an element of sometimes being uncomfortable. I think, particularly when I think about moments throughout my career, I was always, especially as a graduate, especially when I started putting my hands up, putting myself in situations where I could take on that new project, asking those questions to really understand how I can do more or be better. And I also find that, like, being a Black woman and started my career in a space where there weren't many people like me, that willingness to grow was almost very, like, natural. It was like a natural instinct where, I have to demonstrate that I deserve to be here, I'm as good as anybody else, and see, like, I am open to opportunities that come my way. And so when it comes to growth, I think, like I said, there's that element of being intentional, setting goals, measuring goals, making sure you have someone to keep you accountable. Um, and not allowing kind of setbacks to hold you back. Because I think one of the biggest challenges of whether you're really ready to grow is, how do you respond to setbacks? How do you respond to hurdles? How do you respond to barriers that may come up in that process? I always say that growth is not an easy process. And I love this analogy that sometimes I think I'm quite a visual person, but often when I think about growth, I think about a plant. You take those seeds and you put it into the soil. And actually, there's a season of darkness for those seeds. And I think there's an element of uncertainty sometimes when you're growing, because you imagine the seed in the soil, there is no sunshine at that moment. But you have to keep applying yourself, whatever you need to push yourself beyond the soil, whatever you need to do to push yourself beyond that season, you have to keep doing. So water yourself, make sure you're learning, make sure you're getting sunshine. Who can you connect yourself with, who can fill you up with more knowledge? And with it, like the same way with a plant, you start to see the roots grow and it pushes right through the soil. and you start to see it spring out. And that's how I see growth. And then you continue to nurture yourself. How can I continue to keep watering myself, filling myself with knowledge? And so for me, that's how I always envision growth, making sure you put yourself in the right circumstance and environment and fill yourself with what you need to go to that next level. And then one more thing I'll say on growth is recognizing that it's a continuous journey. um I always like when it comes to growing, I think, okay, like I said, you set goals. What is the end goal? Once you get to that goal, the growth doesn't stop there, right? You have to think about the next step. And I think it's important to call out that doesn't mean that you're in this constant place of like not being satisfied. Rather, it means that you recognize that this is a journey that really in some ways doesn't end. You're always finding ways to do better, to make that next milestone. And so I think those are kind of the things I would say as when you think about growth and how to just really be intentional about it.
Yeah, you're dropping gems there, Opeyemi. Do you know what? I feel like when you're talking about that, it's almost like mindset, though. You know, when you
Yeah.
even said, knowing that you have to come here, prove yourself or know that you can do it. I feel like, yeah, that part is mindset. But what about, you touched on their accountability partners. Is
Mm.
that something you've always had? Has that changed? How have you found the right accountability partner? If, for somebody that's looking for that, would you have?
Yes. I would say that I feel like I've been so blessed in life to be surrounded by people who are go-getters, who set good examples, who want to do better. First and foremost, my parents. My parents are probably the most hardworking people I know, especially growing up as a child. So again, having their example of being diligent, working hard, not allowing like challenges around you to hinder you from progressing, they have set a good foundation for me. And then I also have like now when I think about my present day, my husband is another great accountability partner. He is equally someone who works hard. And so telling him, listen, this is what I want to do. I'm trying to work towards this. Having someone like him encouraging me, checking in, like, okay, I mean, you said you wanted to do this, like, what's going on with it? And the same applies for my sisters and my friends. I have a good community around me. And I think that's part of it. You have to kind of ask yourself, who are those individuals around me that are going to encourage me to pursue the things they know I'm capable of doing? Because I think there are sometimes you may be surrounded by people who will question, like, oh, can you really do that? And there's no problem with having someone ask those difficult questions because it's good to think about, if this doesn't work out, what will I do? But more than that, you want someone who will ask you those questions to get you thinking, but also champion you, encourage you, and also like call you out if you're not doing what you said you're going to do. And so I think to answer your question, yeah, I do feel like for the most part, I have had people around me who hold me accountable to the things I say I'll do.
Amazing. That makes absolute sense because I wasn't sure if it's more of the, not like a structured thing where you're like, we're going to be accountability partners, or maybe like you said, it's the people you position yourself around that
Yeah,
you know will do certain things or help
yeah.
you on that road.
Yeah, but equally, I do have some accountability partners as well, depending on what it is. So sometimes it might be fitness, and we have like a WhatsApp group, and we have friends, and we're like, "Did you get on the Peloton today? Did you do your steps?" So I do have accountability partners in that way, and also in a more structured way. Even with work, I have colleagues. I'm like, "Listen, I'm trying to do this. Like, what do you think? Okay, let's make sure it happens." So I think it depends on the context, the goal, or whatever you're trying to do, and I guess depending on that circumstance, those accountability partners can vary.
Yeah, yeah, got you, absolutely. So we've spoken a lot about growth, but what about on the opposite end, in terms of feeling stagnant? Have there been times
Mm,
when you felt stagnant, and how have you really pushed through and realigned on your goals? I think that's something that happens to people quite a bit, or can often happen to people in their careers.
yes, I think yes. Being stagnant is a place where I feel like it creates so much frustration. It can create so much, I guess, in a way, like questioning yourself, like, why am I in this situation? No one wants to feel stuck, essentially. Um, and to answer your question, yes, I have felt stagnant in my career. But when it comes to feeling in that place where you're not really progressing, I feel like there are two kind of questions you need to ask yourself. And I would say one is, am I experiencing this level of being stagnant? Is this because of my inaction? Is this because of a willingness to remain in my comfort zone? So am I responsible for how I'm feeling? Or is it my circumstance? Has my circumstance created a condition where I am unable to progress? And I think the minute you're able to kind of decipher which of the two it is, that then is going to kind of give you an indication of how you should act. And so, in the first scenario where you're the reason for not progressing, maybe you're feeling comfortable and you don't really want to push yourself. Maybe, you're going through a lot, so you haven't taken on more to grow. Or maybe you're just like, I don't really want more right now. This is just easy for me and I like ease and comfort. In a situation like that, and you're starting to feel like, actually, I do want to grow, then the action is on you. What do I need to do differently to start to progress? Like, if it's a work situation, do I need to now start to put my hands up for more projects? Do I need to have a conversation with my manager about my career growth and my career trajectory? I think if it's the second situation where actually it's not so much you, the individual, it's your environment, this is where you need to start asking yourself questions on, do I need to start thinking about what's next for me? And I think definitely there have been times in my career where I have had moments where I'm doing everything that's required of me. I'm meeting all of my deliverables. I have strong relationship with my stakeholders. I can't necessarily see where I'm not necessarily doing enough in those situations. And having been in a situation like that in a former company, I said, I'm going to have a conversation with my MD. And I pulled together like a whole presentation to talk about, this is what I've done, this is how I'm driving impact, this is what my journey has been. How can you support me to move forward? And so I think that's, where you can again take control in a situation where you see it's your circumstance. How can I shift the circumstance? How can I shift the environment? But then I always say that, look, if you are in a situation where you can see there is no visible opportunity for you to progress, for you to grow, then the question you need to start asking is this the place I need to be? And so I think, like I said, it really depends on like why you're in this season of being stagnant, and then figure out how do you kind of put in a plan to move out of it.
Yeah, I like that advice actually of the understanding the why behind it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that because it can feel hard, but I think like you've said, depending on the why is the route you take, right, to
Hmm.
address it. Yeah, okay.
I totally agree.
Yep. And so, what habits or routines have helped you to stay focused on personal and professional growth?
Ooh. I feel like a big part of it, I would say, is my faith.
Yeah.
I think that is the foundation of me wanting to grow and develop. I think my faith closely aligns to even the work I do, because I genuinely care about people, and I believe and I strongly see DEI as a space that cares about people. And I think the reason I even got into this work is because it is that one space where like the professional and the personal can intersect, and you really can live out a sense of purpose through what you do in a meaningful way. And so I would say, to really answer that question, part of it is being clear on your goals, what you're trying to achieve. I think being someone who is driven has helped me. Also, being someone who has focused on my purpose has helped me. And I think, when it comes to growth, when it comes to um, my career and how I've been able to, I guess, push myself in different ways. It just goes back to wanting to be a light wherever I find myself, wanting to have an impact wherever I find myself. I wanted to do work that is meaningful. And I think that's what helps me to continuously grow. That's what helps me to kind of understand the types of goals that I want to set out. And so, yeah, I think Probably those are the key things that come to mind.
Yeah. Do you know what the purpose part actually really made me think? Because I think how does one? I don't know if this can be answered, but how does one recognize what their purpose is? I know for you, you've said faith, your faith, and that's helped you with you care about people. Do you feel like it's just something that people know, or
No, but for me, I can only speak to how I really
yeah,
understand my purpose. For me, it's like, what are the things that just come naturally to me? What are the things, whether I'm at work or at home, that is just something that I want to do, that I think to do, that I enjoy doing? And I think that's what your purpose is aligned to. So, for example, someone may just have a gift with photography. They're just good at it. It's something they've always been interested. And actually, when you think about photography, it's such an impactful career, or it's such an impactful way of working, because you capture moments, whether it's capturing nature and its beauty, whether it's capturing moments through events or somebody's wedding or birthday. You have this gift and ability to see something, capture it, and now someone else can look at it and value what you saw through your lens. And so that is how I see purpose. And then I see it in what effect does it have? What positive effect does it have on the next person? And it doesn't matter, I feel like even when you think about, like, you could apply it to so many different careers, and I think that's just for me on a personal level, like how I connect what I do to my purpose. And so some people may do this work and may not necessarily see it as like their purpose. They may just see it as something they're passionate about, which is why I say it really depends on the individual. But I do feel that this is, part of what, God has put in my heart to want to do. And it's something that brings me joy at the end of the day. Like, I love it.
yeah,
I love
yeah,
it. And the funniest thing is, I don't always feel like I love it because it's not easy work. It can be frustrating, it can be tiring. It's work that personally impacts my life as a Black woman, as somebody who's probably, for the most part of my career, been a minority in any environment I've found myself in. But regardless of that, that personal connection to this work means that when I do it with like dedication, and there is a level of resilience and determination to actually see impactful change occur. And so, yeah, I think I've said a lot about purpose. But
no, no,
yeah,
no, it makes sense.
I think
Yeah,
you can,
yeah.
yeah, I think that's just how I feel about it.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. No, and I just asked because I feel like I know there's been times when I've literally thought, what is my purpose?
Mm,
And I really think, oh, what, and as someone that is of faith as well, I'm like, even, what is, even just in life or God's purpose for me, it's like, what is my purpose? And so, yeah, that's why I was asking. I feel like people have that question and it's like, how do we recognize it? So that's why I kind of delved
yeah,
into that a bit more.
no, I love that.
So, we're going to delve a bit into personal branding. I feel like this is really
Hmm.
big for employees these days, one's
Yes.
personal brand. How would you define your personal brand and how did you go about building it?
It's a good question. It's a good question. And funnily enough, we talk about personal branding a lot in our book, my husband and I wrote. Um, and how would I define my personal brand? I think probably I would boil it down to like maybe three core areas. One we've already spoken about, being purpose driven. The second is about, for me, impact. And I think the third area for me is about growth. And all of these things, funnily enough, I think we've spoken about all of these things in some capacity, but I feel like all of these things connect really to who I am as a person. And like I said, being purpose driven for me is about, living out what I believe I'm called to do. I believe my personal brand is, people know me as someone who just wants to make a positive impact, which ties back to the word impact I said earlier, and growth. At one point, I even had a business called The Growth Box, which again was all about creating opportunities for people to think about self-development, to think about, emotional, spiritual, mental growth. And so, yeah, I would say those feed into my personal brand. Um, yeah.
Cool. And so just touching on how you've built it. So yours is,
Yes.
yeah, it's a bit like you said, you've had a previous business that you were even doing that was in growth, also in just generally your work and how you conduct yourself and do things. How would you say you've kind of built your brand around it?
Yeah, do you know, I feel like personal brand isn't something I always thought about. You know, it's not when I first started my career, I can't say I always thought like, oh, what's my personal brand? But I think as I progressed, I started to realize that people make assumptions about who you are based on sometimes how you look or how they perceive you to be. And so, actually, even in the book, we talk when we talk about personal brand, the first question I ask to the reader is, "Who do people say you are?" And that's a clear indication of the personal brand you've built. And what I realized when I started my career is that there were elements of this personal brand that I realized I was losing control of. Why? Because I wasn't being intentional about how I showed up. Does that mean I showed up in a negative light? Absolutely not. I think, as you know, being a minority, I was very aware that I needed to show up as my best self. But regardless of that, you cannot always control how people perceive you. They might, you know, I remember people used to say things like, "Oh, you're such a diva," and be thinking,
And that's funny because
like,
I've never got that. I've never.
but no, I'm not. But I just, I think maybe they've been listening to like, I don't know, some Beyonce or whatever, you know, and they just would, again, they would make assumptions about the kind of music I would listen to, or like you give feedback and they just would take it differently. So I started to realize that, look, if you're not intentional about your personal brand, people set the brand for you. And so that's why you need to really think about, who do people say I am? What do I want to be known for? What do I want people to be aware of when it comes to me? And I always think, when I leave the room, what's the kind of things you want people to say about you? And so it was only till later on in my career where I thought more about being intentional about the kind of brand I had. So that meant, like, in the kind of work I was delivering, making sure my attention to detail was up here so that people recognize and know me for delivering excellence. You know, whenever I engaged with people, I was always polite and friendly. I do smile a lot, so I was very warm. But again, people would remember me for that positive energy, for being warm. I'm always thinking about, how can we do things better? How can we, you know, do things differently to have a greater impact? So again, people started to recognize me for, you know, the bias for impact. And so actually, those are the things that helped me to build my brand. A, recognizing that if I don't take control of the narrative, people will build their own narrative based on stereotypes or assumptions. And so I would say that, yeah, I think that's, I started to build my brand based on how I wanted people to see me.
Yeah, and I feel like this will be key, especially for people early in their career, because you're
Okay.
not alone when you say, I didn't think about personal brand when I first started my career. I'm absolutely with you on that. In fact, I think it's only in the more recent years that I've really understood more about it and the importance of it. And it's to that point, like what you said about, what do people say when you're not in the room? Because it
Mhm.
even sounds silly, but for instance, I think I've always been like a really hard worker. Like in whatever I'm doing, I'm going to put my best foot forward. And when I used to like get good feedback, it sounds crazy, but I used to think, oh, people say this about me because they like me. But it's no, it's because you're showing up as your best self. You're working
Exactly.
hard, you're putting in the effort. And that is something that people recognize you for. So I think you giving that advice about what do people say about you is so key, as I mentioned, for those even just starting out in their careers, because you can start building out early, I say. So
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's even what you said about like feedback and how you accept and receive feedback. That's a massive thing as well for a lot of women. I think when we're thinking about International Women's Day and Women's History Month, you know, sometimes we'll hear praise and sometimes be like, oh, it's okay, or no, accept it. If you've worked hard, you've worked hard. And thank you very much. I'm glad, you know, I'm glad, you know, that it had that impact. Accept the praise. You deserve the praise. And I think there is an element of wanting to be humble, which is great, but that doesn't mean that you do not amplify where you are driving impact. And so it's again being really aware on how do I demonstrate the great work I'm doing, but without coming across as proud and like, oh yeah, look at me, but still welcoming that praise and saying thank you. I'm glad, that it has had that impact. So people aren't saying nice things to you because they like you, it's because you're doing a great job.
Yeah, no, it just took me a while. It just took me a while to realize. I'm with you. What are some of the common mistakes that people make when they're trying to build their personal brand? Have you seen any?
I think when you're building your brand, you have to be so you have to be genuine to, like, you have to be authentic, because one thing that is difficult to sustain is trying to be something you're not. And so again, when it comes to building your personal brand, or where you're thinking about, how do I show up in this space, you do need to show up as yourself, put your best foot forward, but not be disingenuous, because what will probably happen is different versions of yourself will show up, and people will start to be like, oh, I thought she was person A, but she's showing up in this particular way. And I think that's sometimes a mistake. Sometimes people put themselves under pressure to become something they're not. And then by doing so, do a disservice to their own selves by not showing up authentically. Equally, like, work environments need to create that space and that culture for people to feel like they can show up as their best selves. So I do think that's an area where people may make mistakes when it comes to their personal brand. And I think the other piece of just not thinking about your personal brand at all, and not realizing that whether you are intentional or not intentional about your personal brand, you do have one.
Yeah.
um, and so I think that's another area where people can, make a mistake, or just leave their personal brand to kind of chance. Like, so yeah, I think those are probably the main two areas that come to mind.
Yeah, yeah, no, that is true. Do you know what? I think being yourself is your superpower. It might sound quite cliche, but it is true. There's nobody else that is you, so it is best to turn up as yourself. And I read a post today, and this lady was saying that she posts a lot on LinkedIn and posts content, and when people meet her, they say, "Oh, you're just like how I thought you are online," and she was like, "Yeah,
Hmm.
because I just post as my true self. So what you're
Yeah.
seeing is what you get." And I thought that is, if that's what you get when people meet you, then I think to a degree you're doing a good job. And so you have done some amazing things in your career of PME. What has been one of the most defining moments of your career or personal growth?
Or I think I have to say writing the book with Raphael. Um, because often, I think for a long time after writing the book, I didn't really think about it as a big deal. And I think I'm a kind of person, like, when I've met a goal, I don't know how long I really actually take to like celebrate that goal and like realize that like the impact of it. And so I would find, like, after having written the book, like, I would go to different events or like be in different spaces. And if I was with someone I know, I might introduce myself, and somebody would be like, and she's an author. And I'd be like, oh my gosh, that's so true. Yeah, I am an author. And I think for a long time, I didn't really, I don't think I took enough time to really like realize what it was that we put all together. And I think that book was such a labor of love. It was so much like for our community, but it was also for people outside of our community to be able to like learn and understand sometimes what it's like for us navigating a world that has structural issues that make it challenging sometimes for us to progress, but regardless of those challenges, so many people still progress. And for me, that, writing twice as hard was really about empowering our community, which goes back to like my desire to see people grow, to my desire to like encourage others, to see people like reach their full potential, regardless of whatever barriers may exist. And so for me, that is a massive accomplishment, because I feel like I'm now able to speak to people and get to places without even like leaving my home. And I think the one time that I really realized the impact, or like the how meaningful it was, it was like when there was this university, I think they were in North Carolina, they had created a book club for young black men. And they reached out on Instagram to myself and Raf to say like how impactful the book has been for this group of students at the uni. And when I randomly get messages from people about the book, I'm so encouraged because I'm like, oh my gosh, this is great. It's doing what we wanted it to do, which is to educate, empower, encourage. We wanted it to help people realize that, listen, if you apply yourself, regardless of what is around you, you can progress. And there are so many examples of individuals included in the book who have done that. And so I would say, like, that is such an accomplishment. Because it really was a labor of love. And yeah, it brings me joy to
Yeah.
know that it's helping people.
I can just see how much you are, like how much making an impact and helping others means to you, and being able to do that. So that's amazing, and I'm sure that book has helped so many people. So for those that haven't read it, I will be leaving the link in the bio so that they can get it. Yeah, and then do you know what? One other thing you touched on is taking the time to celebrate. You know, we do one
Yes.
thing and then we just want to move on to the next. No, take some time. That honestly, you, I really felt you when you said that, because I think I'm the same. Oh, I want to achieve this. You've done it, on to the next. No, take
Mhm.
some time and
Exactly.
bask in it.
You have to look back and say, I did that. And actually, funnily enough, there was an Adobe conference or event last week, Change Makers in celebration of International Women's Day. And someone shared this, oh, it was so great. She mentioned that we're often so focused on the to-dos. I need to do this, I need to do that. But what about the to-das?
Yeah.
I did that. And I think there is a need for us to focus more on those ta-da moments, those moments where you've accomplished something, where you've done something to make yourself proud, where you've overcome a particular challenge, and actually just say, yes, I did that. And honestly, well done to me.
Mm.
And so I'm with you. I agree that, yeah, it's so important to actually celebrate the wins as
Mm.
much as we're striving for more.
Yeah, give yourself a pat on the back, I say. Otherwise, you're just always you know, like the rat race as well. You're just chasing, chasing, chasing.
Exactly.
Story for another day. So, throughout your career, Opeyemi, was there or has there been a person or experience that has made you feel supported as a woman in your field?
You know what? I feel like there have been a lot of people that have helped and supported and encouraged me throughout my career. But going back to my early career, there is one woman who stands out. Her name is Anna Doherty. I actually mentioned her in the book. And she is someone who was a mentor, a sponsor, a safe space. Um, it just was, I think at that stage in my career where you're navigating so much, I was transitioning between promotions. So she supported me when I got promoted to vice president. When I went on maternity leave twice, she was someone who gave me a lot of encouragement and guidance. When, by the time I had my third maternity leave, I was at another company. And even when I moved on from JP Morgan, we stayed in touch. And one thing I remember her saying to me is three words, well, six words really, but three key points. Be bold, be brave, and be yourself. And I always remember that. Be be bold, be brave, and be yourself. And she was a managing director, of course, a woman in tech, probably well over 25, definitely well over 25 years career in investment banking, of course, a male dominated um, industry. And one of the things I saw in her is she was a champion and a sponsor of women, but particularly for me to have somebody like that coach me and really kind of show me how to demonstrate impact was instrumental, I would say, when I was really looking for promotion and when I was looking to move to the next step. I'm really learning how to just position myself as a leader in my career. And so I think a lot of what I've learned from her, but also other individuals who have shown a similar level of grace and support, is to share that kind of advice with others. And so try and show up for others in a similar capacity. And so absolutely, like the saying says, No person is an island, no man, no woman, no individual is an island. And we do need people. And so as you build your career, find those individuals. Sometimes they're your peers, sometimes they show up as sponsors or mentors or coaches. They're individuals who may be more senior, and you can equally learn from people who are junior. But find those people who will support you, but will also teach and help you progress. So yeah, she is definitely someone among many others as well.
Do you know what? I love asking this question because people don't realize the impact that they have on someone. The
Oh
fact that you're speaking
yeah.
about her years later, it just shows. And also one thing you touched on then about paying it forward. So we see the things people have done for us and how can we kind of do that for others. But yeah, I love that. And she sounds like somebody that there are people that say they advocate, but do you really advocate? And then there are those that really say they do it or make you feel seen or say they helped others feel seen and they actually do it.
Hmm.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
yeah. Amazing. So, what is a piece of advice that you would give to someone that's just starting out in their career or thinking about entering an industry?
Oh, it's funny, I get this one a lot. I would say be curious, have the hunger to learn. Because I think the more you can learn, the more you can know about your industry, about how other things interact with your business area, how other divisions kind of connect to the work you do, the better you can become at the job you're doing. I would also say build relationships. It's so important to not just know the people you report into or your team, but also who are your stakeholders? How can you build better relationships with them? Even with your peer group, how can you learn more about what they're doing? Because you never know when you want to make that transition, like I did from one division to a completely different division, but in the same organization. And actually, I was able to do that. Part of that was some of the relationships I had built. So I would say be curious, be intentional about the relationships you build. I would say, again, think about your personal brand. That is very important. And I think we've covered a lot on branding already. And also have a goal, have a rough idea of like where you want to get to or where you want to go to. Absolutely, there are parts of your career where you sometimes don't know what you don't know. But that's where being curious comes into play. As you start to learn more about the industry you're in or the organizations you're in or the individuals that you work with, that also feeds into actually where do I want to go in my career? As I would say, absolutely start to think about your future, and not in a way that intimidates you or feels daunting, but in a way that helps you think about what those actionable next steps are, as you develop and grow in the current place you're in.
Yeah, yeah, amazing. And so, just two more questions for you, Opeyemi. How do you hope your work and achievements inspire others, especially other women and young girls?
Well, this is a good question because I do have a daughter. And the work that I've done, the way I want it to inspire others, and sometimes I wonder, like, is it actually the nature of the work itself or the approach to the work? In one element, I would say, be hardworking, like, give your best. Like, that is so, for me, that is so important. And I think it's important to value the work you do. Where you value the work you do, you want to do better. You want to do more. So I think that's important. But equally, I want young girls to know that you can be whoever you want to be. So life will always have its challenges. But what you have to think about is how do I grow regardless of what's going on around me? How do I stay focused on the vision that is ahead of me? How do I set an example for those who are coming behind me? And how do I, let my light shine wherever I find myself? And so I would say to my daughter, equally to any young girl or anyone thinking about their career, is do not allow yourself to be intimidated by the circumstances around you. Rather, believe in what you have inside of you and believe that you can deliver. and that will give you the confidence at least to go ahead. One of the things my dad always says to me is be cool, calm, and confident.
I
And I'm
love it.
like, thanks, Dad. But yes, I take it on. Like, I literally take it on. Like, if I'm doing a big presentation, or if I'm doing, anything that I have a bit of nerves for, that's something he says to me: be cool, calm, and confident. And so that is a message for everyone out there as well. Remember those three C's, and just know that regardless of the situation around you, you absolutely can do it.
Yeah. Wow. I like. There's so many things that I'm taking from that. That's the triple C. I'm going to call that
Oh,
because I'm going to
triple
remember
C.
that. The triple C. And you know what?
Yes.
Yeah. And just literally, it is a reminder. You can be who you want to be. That's such a powerful thing. Like if you, I feel like if you remember that, it will shape how you go
Yes.
about things and who you are. So I absolutely love that.
Yeah. It's funny,
Yeah.
as you were speaking, I was thinking of, the Nas song, I know I can
Yeah.
be what I want to be. If I work
If
out
I
of
work
it,
hard at it, I'll be where I
I'll be
want to
where I
be.
want to be.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so, listen, we can definitely do it.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And so, where can people find you?
So you can find me on LinkedIn by my name, and then Instagram, opeyemi.sofoluke. Um, that's it really. I'm not, you can find out, well, you can find the podcast I did with my husband around the book on Spotify. So just search Twice as Hard Book. Um, and yeah, I think those places you can find me.
Amazing. Well, I'm definitely going to be leaving all the links as well, so it'll be easier for everyone. But I just want to
Amazing.
say thank you so much for taking this time to talk to me today, Opeyemi. I've actually loved this conversation. I feel like they've been yeah, it's been amazing. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me as well. This has been great. I've loved all your questions as well. And yeah, appreciate this time with you.
Oh, it's been a pleasure. Thanks, Opeyemi.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye.
Bye.
If you enjoyed this video, then don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.